There's a version of yourself that's patiently waiting, and the goal is we show up for ourselves every single day until we're introduced. But those little things matter, and you matter. Like whether you see it or not, your presence in the world makes a difference.
Hey guys, how you doing? Hope you're having a good week so far. My name is Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, and this is my podcast, Feel Better, Live More. Do you think that your brain's potential is limited? Or do you think that you can continually keep improving it depending on what you do? Well, this week's returning guest, Jim Quick, was labelled the boy with the broken brain after suffering a traumatic brain injury as a child. Now, this label shaped his internal beliefs about his own ability and potential for many years. But fast forward to today, and Jim has amazingly transformed his challenges into strengths and has become a world-renowned brain coach who's helped thousands of people around the world enhance their memory and improve their brain performance. Jim has spent the past 3 decades teaching his learning techniques to students from universities such as Harvard and Caltech. He's also helped executives and employees from companies such as Google, Virgin, and Nike, and institutions like the United Nations. He's also the author of the best-selling book, Limitless, Upgrade Your Brain, Learn Anything Faster, and Unlock Your Exceptional Life. And his first appearance on my podcast, 12 months ago now, is one of the most downloaded episodes in this podcast's history. Now, in today's conversation, we cover so many different topics relating to our brain and its limitless potential, including the importance of continuous learning, how small changes can lead to big improvements in brain function, the impacts of our self-talk, the role our environment plays in shaping our productivity, the importance of managing our energy and emotional states, the power of choice in personal growth, and so many practical techniques for better time management and focus. In fact, I think one of the highlights of this episode is a real-time memory activity that Jim guides us all through, demonstrating the practical application of his techniques and showcasing how anyone can improve their memory and cognitive abilities if they have the right strategies. Jim is such a wonderful and caring human being and a quite brilliant communicator who has bucket loads of practical knowledge that he is super passionate about sharing. And I think his own journey from struggle to success serves as a powerful reminder that each of us has a brain with incredible, limitless potential. Why are you so passionate about brain health?
Well, my inspiration really came from my desperation. I mentioned in our previous episode, I had a traumatic brain injury when I was a child. I was 5 years old and I took a very bad fall in elementary school. And, I was rushed to the emergency room. My parents said before I was very playful, very energized, very curious, but afterwards I shut down. I would have these migraines every day as a 5, 6-year-old. I thought it was normal. Balance issue, coordination issues, focus, memory. It took me 3 years longer to learn how to read. At that same time, my grandmother who was taking care of me, she passed of Alzheimer's when I was 7. So I started seeing, not only going through my issues, but if anyone's listening and they've had a family member or somebody close to them have brain aging challenges like dementia, she started calling me by my father's name. And she repeated something she just said 30 seconds earlier. And it was just very confusing as a child. Mm-hmm. So, but it informed what I do today. I was labeled, I had a teacher call me the boy with the broken brain. That was kind of my moniker throughout school. The kids would call me that too. And then, and just as importantly, I was calling myself that. So every single time I did badly in school or wasn't picked for sports, I would say, because I have the broken brain. And so those are my struggles. And I don't know if your listeners could relate to this. I'm sure some can, that your struggles can become strengths, that adversity can be an advantage, that with challenge comes a level of change. And so having lost my grandmother, who was the world to me, to Alzheimer's, to having my broken brain, my traumatic brain injury, to having my learning difficulties, it informed what I do today. And it's been over 3 decades as a brain coach, helping people. My mission really is to build better, brighter brains. No brain left behind.
It's interesting hearing your story. There's obviously the personal struggles you've had. It's what you saw with your grandmother. And it's fascinating to hear how those experiences as a child have influenced you today in terms of what you do. You know, you're helping many, many people around the world improve their brain health. A theme that has come up regularly on this podcast over the past couple of years is that of regrets. And I think about your work sometimes through the lens of regret. What is the cost of people not optimizing their brains, not doing the things that you recommend that will help them with their focus, their memory, their performance, and ultimately their brain health?
I spend a lot of time every year in senior centers, in nursing homes, maybe because I lost my grandparents at such an early age. I go there I go there initially to help them with their memory, to polish off their memories, because I feel like when we lose our memory, it's if you know somebody who's lost their memory through brain aging or other conditions, it's like they lose who they are. You know, it's almost like our identity, our humanity is a tapestry of our life. But if you were to erase that, then who are we, right? So while we teach people how to remember facts, figures, foreign languages, formulas, so on, I think remembering your loved ones, remembering your lessons, remembering the times you laughed and loved and lived are most important. But when I'm in these senior centers, I gain a lot of wisdom because I didn't have those grandparents to pass on that information, the life experience. I believe the life you live are the lessons you teach others. But I also hear regret, exactly what you said. And somehow they limited their life because they didn't pursue a relationship because of what people thought about that relationship or that person. Or maybe they chose a career path because it was expected of them by their parents or something like that. So there's this form of regret that comes out. And I just want to remind everybody who's listening, when we're taking our final breaths, and it's not a positive thing to think about maybe, but beginning with the end in mind and making the most of your time, when you're taking your final breaths, none of other people's opinions or expectations are going to matter. None of our fears are going to matter at the moment. What's going to matter are the things like, how we laughed, how we loved, how we learned, how we lived. And it's knowing that could inform what we do today, because tomorrow is not guaranteed. And a lot of us have past histories. We talked about this in the previous episode, that things shaped us. And I would say that while I just really do believe while change and growth is scary, nothing is as scarier as regret, or nothing is as scarier as being stuck somewhere you're not supposed to be.
Yeah. Life is short, right?
It is. And then yet today in the now, Eckhart Tolle's work, the power of now is what we have. And I think our now is more powerful than all our yesterdays combined, because this is where we could actually, affect change.
Yeah, I think now that I am, and I have been for a few years now, on the other side of 40, you start to look at life differently. You start to realize that actually time is limited, right? You understand this concept more and more of mortality, that life can keep getting better and better for sure, but at some point it's going to end. Yeah. And I think that's been such a powerful realization for me, because it then gives an urgency to day-to-day life. It doesn't mean you have to get out of bed and be stressed out. I don't mean that kind of urgency. I mean the sort of urgency where I feel that every day counts, right? Yeah. You don't have limitless time, to use the name of your book, right? You don't have limitless time. Time actually is limited. And therefore the habits and the practices you recommend people to improve their brain, their focus, their productivity, to help them read faster, to learn more things. I actually think there's an urgency there for all of us to start engaging with those things. Otherwise, without us realizing it, we're kind of just wasting our days.
Yeah, there's that mental exercise, this thought experiment, and I would challenge everyone to do this with us. It's that idea that some of us have seen, you might have heard of it. It's like if you were to wake up and there was 86,400 whatever pounds, euros, dollars, whatever in your bank account, and it's yours every single day. But at the end of the day, it vanishes. And then it replenishes the next day. And the idea behind it, this thought experiment, is what would you do with that money? If you woke up and there was I'm going to use dollars, $86,400 in your account, but you knew at midnight it was going to disappear, how would you invest that money? And you would invest in things that really mattered, right? That could be there for you. But that's our time, because there are 86,400 seconds in a day. 86,400 seconds in one day. And it's the same thing. Whatever we don't invest into the future, we just lose. And then it's also interesting to think about, because let's say you're in your day and you're somewhere and somebody treats you badly, maybe a stranger on the street, and you lose 10 seconds of just anger. You wouldn't spend all the other money trying to get back that $10, no. Right? But a lot of us do that, and I'm guilty of it also as well. Yeah. You get slighted or you get a comment on social media, and it just you could dwell on it for 10 seconds. But some people, what they do is they take all their other money or their time, hours, to get back that 10 seconds, which they'll never do. Yeah. Right? And
it's a great analogy, this idea that we're spending time all the time. We're spending it.
Yeah.
We don't think about that, but we are spending it. Now, I really like this analogy, but I imagine some people could misinterpret it and go, okay, that means time is limited. I need to make the most out of each day, which I don't disagree with. I think we should try and make the most out of each day. But some people, especially in this culture, will interpret that as the most out of each day means working as much as I can. But that's not what you mean, is it?
No, I mean, I think it's really important. Everyone's a little bit individual, just like even with nutrition, everyone's a little bio-individual based on their values that they hold. I think it's very important. So, for example, when I wake up in the morning, I do this thought experiment where I imagine myself, again, coming back that night into bed. Fast forward to the end of the day, and my wife asks how my day was, and I say, today was amazing. What a happy day. What a great day. And then I ask myself, what had to happen that day, today, in order for me to feel that way? And I just think of 3 things personally and professionally, and that's my target. Because there's a book by Dr. Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, that says, begin with the end in mind. And that's my way of practicing that, meaning that when it's time to celebrate in sports, for example, because you see a scoreboard and if you've won. Well, I don't think we create that for our day. And this cliche where nobody comes to the end of their life wishing they spend more time in the office, right? But beginning with the end in mind, I feel like sometimes we're burnt out, not because we're doing too much in our day, but maybe we feel burnt out because we're doing too little of the things that light us up, that make us come alive, and designing a life around that. And for everybody, it's different. It might be work. Some people, they love it and it juices them. I love my work also, but I think it's important to also have a harmony in terms of the elements that, make us more whole.
Yeah.
And so, and time, I like this conversation because I've never talked about it, but it's really the thing that we all have that's equal. That's probably the only thing, because everybody has different levels of education, opportunity, network, income, but we all have 24 hours in a day. And that's, but it's how we use that time that really, I feel like, matters.
I think something you said there was so important, which is this idea that how we wish to live our lives and spend our time is individual. Okay? What works for you is what works for you. What works for me is what works for me. And we shouldn't judge others for living the life in the way that they want to live it, right? As you say, for some people, it will be their work. Having said that, I think what's great about those questions and that thought experiment you do first thing in the morning is that it brings an element of intention to your day and therefore to your life, right? So you're intentionally deciding this is what is important to me. Whereas I do think that many people, they're so busy, they just stumble out of bed, they're straight onto their phones, they're reacting to the world, and they're not spending a moment to intentionally think about, how am I spending my time? Is this in harmony with who I am? Is this what I want to be doing day after day? And so I want to talk to you a little bit about time management, Jim. I know people come to you and seek you out for a variety of different reasons, but I think one thing they want is to manage their time better. How do you see time management? And I believe you have a model to explain that. An 8-part model, is that right?
Yeah, we built it out. It's a framework. I'll give everyone an acronym. There are 9 elements, including time management, to be able to get the most out of the day. And I feel like that's what most of us want. And so we could go through it really very quickly.
Let's go through it.
I encourage everyone who's listening to take some notes also. There's this learning curve, but there's also this forgetting curve. Sometimes when we hear something, we forget it the next day. So using the acronym limitless. All right. So these are the areas of management to really improve your productivity, your performance, and I believe your peace of mind. And so the L in limitless is learning management. So this is learning management. If you want to get the most out of the day, I feel part of that day has to be spent in your own growth. I feel like we're most happiest when we're growing and when we're giving, meaning that just like in nature, everything grows, it's green and it grows, or it's brown and it rots, right? And everything has to give back to the ecosystem. Otherwise, it's eliminated. And so I think we learn more so we have more to be able to share. I call them grow givers. We grow so we have more to give, as opposed to go-getters back in the 80s. It was very, get. And then you could give also, but then you become a martyr. But I think you grow so you have more to be able to share, right?
Okay.
And so learning management is prioritizing learning in the day, because some people feel like learning is done. The 2 dips that we see in cognitive performance is usually when people graduate school and when they retire.
Yeah.
Meaning when they retire, a lot of times they retire their mind. They don't use their mind as much. And unfortunately, their body isn't far behind. But also some people associate learning just to school and education. They don't realize it's a lifelong process. But then when they graduate school, like, great, my learning is done. And then they don't use their minds as much. So, for example, we have a to-do list. I think it's very important to have a to-learn list each day. And I think it's very important every month to learn something new, because that's the human mind is the ultimate adaptation tool.
What does that actually mean practically? And I guess what I'm getting at is, and I'm really conscious of this now with this podcast, is each week I talk to incredible people and they're sharing ideas and their perspective and little tips and tricks that people can use.
Yeah.
But I imagine sometimes it can be overwhelming and people can think, yeah, but all these things sound amazing, right? I want to do that. I want to do that. I want to do that. I want to learn Spanish. I want to, go to the gym and work on my zone 2 and my high intensity. And I also want to see my wife and my children and my job, right?
Yeah.
So a learning to-do list, just sort of expand on that a little bit. Yeah. How simple can that be for someone?
So Benjamin Franklin used to have something he called the 5-hour rule, where it's learning an hour a day for 5 days that week. And now everybody could change it, right? It could be 30 minutes, it could be more than an hour, and so on. But
it could even be 10 minutes, right?
Exactly. I mean, because again, our value in society is it's not like it was thousands of years ago or even hundreds of years ago, where it's our muscle power. Today, it's our mind power, right? It's our ability to solve problems, our ability to think, to be able to come up with solutions and innovations. It's not our brute strength. Today, it's our brain strength. But our brain, our mind only expands, but with new ideas and new lessons, right? Through neuroplasticity and so on, through novelty and nutrition. So the idea here is you have a to-learn list, so you are very clear on learning outcomes, because any skill, knowledge, skill, and ability you could adapt, right? So the idea here is just that genius is not born, it's built systematically through discipline, through focus, through proper training or coaching. Mm-hmm. And so let's say you have a to-learn list, I think, for me, it's reading. That's my go-to. I think reading is in the last episode, we did a whole masterclass on speed reading and smart reading, right? So I definitely think people should listen to that. But on my to-learn list are things that I want to challenge myself, new knowledge, skills, and abilities, so I can be more valuable in my society and for my team, for my family, and so on. So how does that work out functionally? I think the most important thing is you schedule that, because you schedule things, but we don't always schedule our personal growth. Or some people don't even schedule their workouts, and they never get to it, and they wonder why, because it wasn't on. I think the number one productivity tool we have is our calendar, right? You put doctor's appointments, or you put meetings or investor meetings, PTA, teacher meetings with your kids, but we're not scheduling our learning as much. So I like to schedule our learning. It could be podcasts, it could be audiobooks, it could be coaching, it could be reading books. My preference is to read. I'm like you, I like to read analog, not on screens. But I will listen to an audiobook and a podcast. I just have to do it at faster speed because of time, right? And so my to-learn list, I have a dedicated time that I want to learn. I read every single day. I mentioned in the previous episode, in the morning I create, in the afternoon I consume, in the evening I clear. So it's a way of, we could talk about other elements that's coming up in the acronym. But, my consumption time is the time I'm reading and learning. Yeah. I'm listening to shows.
So the L of limitless is learning and...
Learning management, yeah. So these are all going to be 9 management systems, if you will.
Yeah, and I love what you said, that they're about productivity, performance, and peace of mind.
Yeah, and even prosperity. When you put these together, I think people, when we're done with it, they'll see how this can relate to all the treasures of their life.
The 4 Ps there, limitless. I remember in our first conversation, you used lots and lots of mnemonics. Mm-hmm. Just a quick detour from limitless for a minute. Why do you use mnemonics so often? Is it so that you can remember things clearly, you can solidify them, you can learn them? Because when you have to go through the creative process of making the mnemonic, you're presumably locking it into your brain. So maybe expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, for both reasons. I come up with these mnemonics because a lot of us in school, they were very effective in memorizing certain things like the colors of the rainbow or the planets, or in the U.S., you have the Great Lakes, HOMES, the acronym HOMES, Lake Huron, Ontario, Michigan, Erie, and Superior, right? Or Roy G. Biv, or for the colors of the rainbow.
Yeah, we did a medical school one for the cranial nerves, which I absolutely cannot say on a microphone. But again, mnemonics are there for a reason.
So I come up with it. It helps me to integrate it. So the number one reason you learn it is for yourself, but the second reason you learn anything is that you can teach somebody else. And I find that when I'm giving keynote presentations or I'm on somebody's media and people ask the listeners, the audience, what they learned, they could go back to the mnemonic, and it's a nice reminder, memory device to be able to, like scaffolding inside their mind to more immediately recall the information. Mm-hmm. And then, but yes, constructing that acronym or mnemonic also helps me to encode the information so I could better store it and retrieve it, out of our memory.
So is that something like your job requires you to, go on stage in various places around the world and talk to people, go on podcasts, make courses, communicate? Do you think mnemonics are helpful for, any one of us, in terms of helping us learn? Do you think mnemonics are helpful?
I do. I find that they're a simple form of a simple memory device. I mean, we could talk about the memory palace and mind mapping and chaining methods and alphanumeric codes. There's different techniques for improving your memory that are certainly more advanced. But if people this is the first time they're exposed to my content or coaching, then it's a simple way for everyone to understand the information, or at least, have a way of organizing the information that's more memorable.
Okay, let's move on to the I.
Yeah. So the first one, again, is learning management. And then just the other thing for learning, I just want to underline and highlight what we talked about, is teaching. Because if you want to learn something, learn it to teach it. Even if they're listening to this episode, think about somebody who you wish was listening to this episode and certainly share it with them. But you could also think about, how would you present this? Like if they're going to ask you what you learned from this episode, and you're going to talk about the limitless kind of day management system, because then you have ownership of the material, right? You're going to learn it better, you're going to focus better, and so on. So learn to teach, wonderful way to improve your learning. So the I is importance management. And so I'm obviously creating words that fit into limitless, because I feel like it's not so much time management, and we will talk about the T in limitless is time. It's priority management. You know what I mean? And so the most important thing is to keep the most important thing the most important thing. And so I feel like to get the most out of the day, we have to be focused on those things that are most important. Because so many of us get really good and at things that maybe in the end don't matter as much. But because we're not intentional about it, or we're mindless about it, then we just feel busy and we feel like we're making progress, but we're running in place. And I think a lot of people, including myself sometimes, we associate busyness with, like, people ask, like, how's your day? And how many times do we say, well, it's really busy? Or how's things going? I'm really busy. And we use busyness almost as a badge of honor, because I think the subtext that we're communicating is like, if we're busy, we're important. You know what I mean? We're valuable because we have so much that we need to do, and so many people are counting on us. And I just want to remind people who are listening that you don't have to fix everything and make every single person in the world happy. So going back to importance, and it's different for every single person, I think it's very important to identify your key values and then work backwards from that. Even when I'm planning my day, again, I'm focused on 3 things personally, 3 things professionally, that thought experiment I do in bed when I wake up, and that's my 6 things. And those are what's important for me that day. Yeah. And that gives me a target. Like, this is one of those 6 things, this conversation I'm having with you, right? And then when I'm here, I'm completely here. And I know when I go to put my head on that pillow tonight that I get to have a level of satisfaction and even cheer because I focused on the things that matter, right? Yeah. And so, because the opposite of not having that, like, let's go through the opposite of not learning, right? If we're staying the same and we're the same person we were 5 years ago, that probably wouldn't make us incredibly happy.
Well, is it even possible to stay the same? Life is always moving. I'm not entirely sure it is possible for us to stay static. I kind of feel we're either growing or we're contracting. Yeah. I don't think being static is an option.
Yeah, and that's I really feel like every day we have a chance because we can make a new choice. And so life is difficult for one of 2 reasons. Either we're leaving our comfort zone, or life is difficult because we stay in our comfort zone, right? And and I just want to remind everyone that we could do hard things. Looking in the mirror, part of self-care is not just, eating the best brain foods and optimizing your sleep. It's looking in the mirror and loving the person, that reflection that's looking back, that's been through so much, but is still standing.
Yeah. Just on this topic of importance management.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Airbnb. Now, I've been using Airbnbs for many years now, for pleasure and for work. And last year, when I was in London for a few days of work, instead of staying in a hotel, I stayed in a wonderful Airbnb, which was centrally located and had a really nice kitchen, so I could start off each day with my own foods, just the way I like it. I've also just booked an Airbnb for a work trip to Oxford, in which I plan on recording a few episodes of this podcast. Now, over the summer, one of my best friends from university told me that he has been hosting his own place on Airbnb when he and his family are away. And he said that the extra money has been fantastic and helped over the years, both with the cost of their holiday and the cost of their new family car, which got me thinking, when we're next away as a family and our house sits empty, perhaps we could Airbnb our own place and make some extra money to go towards our holiday. And if you have a trip coming up, you could potentially do the same. Your home might be worth more than you think. Find out how much at airbnb.co.uk/host. Vivo Barefoot are one of the sponsors of today's show. Now, I am a huge fan of Vivo Barefoot shoes and have been wearing them for over a decade now, well before they started supporting this podcast. I've also been recommending them to patients for years because I've seen so many benefits. I've seen improvements in back pain, hip pain, knee pain, foot pain, and even things like plantar fasciitis. And contrary to what you might initially think, most people find Vivos really, really comfortable. But I have to say, especially at this time of year, as the temperature is starting to drop, their winter boots are absolutely fantastic. And I myself am really enjoying wearing their brand new Gobi warm-lined winter boots. Now, as well as adults, I think they are a fantastic option for children. And I really hope that in the future, more and more children start wearing barefoot shoes like Vivos, as I think this can prevent many downstream problems in the body later on in life. And remember, whether for your children or yourself, if you've never tried Vivos before, it's completely risk-free to do so, as they offer a 100-day trial for new customers. So if you're not happy, you just send them back for a full refund. If you go to vivobarefoot.com/livemore, they are giving 20% off as a one-time code to all of my podcast listeners. Terms and conditions do apply. To get your 20% off code, all you have to do is go to vivobarefoot.com/livemore. If you're not intentional in the morning about what those important things are, you may also end up in a situation where you have done the important things, but you still feel as though you haven't done anything because you haven't specified it. This idea that our to-do lists are never done. There's always emails accumulating. There's always jobs accumulating. So you could have done those 6 important things, but you wouldn't even realize it. And you would just think that you're not winning at life. And there's a couple of things you mentioned so far which relate to a journal I brought out at the start of the year called the 3-Question Journal, which had in it and has in it the 3 most important questions I think we can ask ourselves in the morning and in the evening. And interestingly enough, they kind of mirror your work a little bit, because one of the questions is, which quality or qualities do I want to showcase to the world today? You ask yourself that in the morning. And it's very similar to the question you ask yourself, in order to tell your wife at the end of the day, I had a great day, what would today need to look like? And people can choose whichever question they want, but I think for me, it's just a very simple question to go, let's say I want to show the world the quality of patience today. And it means I'm thinking about that all day. And if I'm tempted to rush or to get snappy, because it's in the back of my mind that patience is what I want to show today, I'm much more likely to behave in that way. And one of the other questions for the morning is, what is the most important thing I have to do today? And again, people say, well, there's more than one. And yes, of course, we might have lots of priorities, but I personally have found it, and with many patients in the past, very useful to actually narrow it down to one thing. Like initially, for me, it started off with work life and family life. And then over time, it's morphed into one. So I challenge myself each morning to go, what is the most important thing? And sometimes it's to do with family. Sometimes it's to do with my health and working out. Sometimes it is to do with work, but it forces me to make a decision first thing in the morning. And I think that's really powerful.
I like that a lot. And it's said that the word priority was only plural as, just a few decades ago. Before it was just, what's the priority? What's the one thing that's most important? And I agree, life and our personal and our work, it's integrated. For me, it's not about balance. It's more about harmony. Balance, for me, it feels like it's very stressful, like a balance beam. And if you look up the definition of balance, it's just equal weight. But I don't necessarily want to spend equal amount of time working as I do working out, right? It's not equal, but harmony is like an orchestra. Not every person contributes the same amount of time, equal, balance, but they all do their thing, and then it creates this amazing symphony, this amazing work of art. And that's how I kind of look at life a little bit more. It's very dynamic, and it doesn't have to be equally balanced, but where you are is where you are. Like if you're with your kids, you're completely there and you're intentional about it. And so I don't think it's so much about the time, because that time really is a feeling, right? It's a state that you feel. Just like when you said patience, we said for learning management, you could have a to learn list. You could have a to be list. Like, I'm going to be patient today. And then, because a lot of times when we're faced with a difficulty or a demand, we usually go in like, what do I need to do? But if we step back and said, before we ask that question, who do we need to be? And if we decide we're going to be patient, the behaviors take care of itself automatically.
It's like going further upstream, isn't it?
Very much so. Because you got that be, do, have, share, kind of that syntax of success. But the I is importance, where the things that matter least, that matter most shouldn't be at the effect of the things that matter least. And so I encourage people to get clear on their values. And part of what's important is asking yourself a question, like, what's most important to me in life? And then you could stack those values, or what's most important to me in my career, what's most important to me in my relationship. But if you ask a general question like, what's most important to me in life, like what comes to mind for you? Like, what's most important to you in life?
Like, if I don't even think straight away, family, wife and kids comes like almost like a gut reaction.
And that affects your decisions on whether you're going to go speak at an event.
Well, we were talking about this just now, right?
Yeah.
And I was saying to you, because of the age my kids are now, I would make very different decisions, I think, around my work life and my life if I didn't have my children and my marriage. I just would. Yeah. And like we all do, like our life situation determines a lot of the time the decisions we make. But the intentionality with which I've thought about this over the past few years, that's what's changed. Talking about what you're saying, going further upstream, until I intentionally realized how important my family was to me. I've always known it's important to me, but when you really embody it, go, no, do your actions and the way you're spending your time reflect the fact that your family are important to you. And once you get clear and you go, well, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, or maybe I'm away more than I would ideally like to be. If I put the family first, if I go, I've mentioned this a couple of times on the show, and one of the reasons I'm not speaking in London this weekend is because it's a weekend. Right? You're at the event. I'm not, because in the summertime, in the springtime, as we're talking, those weekends are really precious to me.
Yeah.
Okay. It doesn't mean I'll never do one, but it takes a lot for me to give up that, because it means it's less time with my children whilst they're still at home and at this age. And that clarity has been transformative for me, because it stops a lot of downstream decision making at its roots. Do you see what I'm saying? Yes.
It's one of those things where I'm the same. Family is very, very important to me. And even on going on this trip, I'm knowing I was going to do that. It informed, because there's other values in terms of presenting that's being met in terms of what's most important to me. But knowing I was going to be away, the week leading up to it, I was making all this emotional deposits for my son, to my wife, and spending time, intentional time, not being distracted on my phone, so that when when I have to go away, it's more understandable because I've invested in that relationship. So like, but going back to family, what feeling, what's the underlying value that family gives you?
Well, love,
Yeah.
connected, supported, nourished. Those are the words that come up for me.
I would say those are your values. Your values are love and connection. Like family is a means to the end values, which is love, connection. Like, for example, my top values in order, because the order matters also, because it's how you make decisions. Love, growth, contribution, adventure. Those are my four primary values in that order. And I make decisions based on those four values. So love, the connections that I have with family and friends. Growth, I want to grow more because that is a high value of my work and my own personal transformation. My third value is contribution, because I grow, so I have more to contribute. Because if I didn't grow, I wouldn't have a whole lot of value to share. And then recently, the past few years, I added the fourth value consciously, which is adventure. Because I also want to I realized that I wanted to have fun in the process.
Yeah.
Going through life, looking back.
Adventure is a lovely term.
Yeah. It's something and that informs when I go on trips like I am now to add things into it that are fun, right?
Yeah.
And
it's funny when you say family also, I feel very strongly, Jim, that, and you like me come from an immigrant family, right? So I don't know your parents' story. My dad, when he came over to the UK and worked ridiculously hard, like many people do, but Dad only slept 3 nights a week for 30 years. He was working days, he was working nights to give us and his family back home in India a better life. So growing up, I didn't see Dad as much as I guess I see my kids, right? But Dad was doing what he felt he had to do, and he probably did have to do it, right? He was supporting, his value probably was family.
Yeah.
My personal happiness doesn't matter. What matters is that I provide. Now, I'm speculating because I didn't have that conversation with my dad, but I imagine it would have been. And Dad also became very, very ill on the back of overwork. He had lupus, kidney dialysis for 15 years, and, was very sick for a number of years, for almost 15 years. So having seen all that, I also, when I think of family, I think of the sacrifice that Mum and Dad made for me and my brother. And I think, rightly or wrongly, I feel that would have been partially wasted if I then do the same thing and I overwork and don't see my children and my wife like Dad did, right? So in some ways, I feel I'm almost paying homage to my dad's sacrifice by intentionally making these decisions. He went to a new country with nothing, had to make his name and make his way and deal with discrimination, all kinds of other things. But because he's gone through that, and Mum as well, I don't need to.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? So I kind of feel that's part of it for me as well.
And his sacrifice became your blessings, right? And so my parents immigrated to the United States. My dad was 13. He lost both of his parents. So he came because they couldn't afford, he came to live with an aunt and uncle in the States. Didn't speak the language, didn't have any money. They lived in the back of a laundromat that my mom worked at. They had many jobs and they worked really hard. I had this mantra growing up, though, that family is most important for my dad. He would say that every day because he lost both his parents at a very young age. And those life conditions shape your values, right? So no wonder family is important because when you have loss, you structure or restructure your value system. And so that's probably one of the reasons why family is so important for me. And it's, for other people, they have their own stories. But I do believe our ancestors, their sacrifice has become our blessings, right? Yeah. And the gifts that we have today. But for importance, it's honing in what's most important to you. So you ask yourself, what's most important to me in life? And then put those things in order. Because some people want security. And that's most important, is safety, because of, their experience. And then they make decisions based on that. And so I think the most important thing has to be the most important thing.
And whatever your answer is, that's okay. It's up to you to answer that.
And it's different for everybody, and it could evolve over time.
Yeah, but at least take the time to ask yourself that question. I think that's the key message, isn't it?
I think having the curiosity to know yourself, and then having the courage to be yourself, that's a big part of it.
Okay, so we've got learning management, importance management. What's the M?
So the M is, when we're talking about, so we haven't even gotten to time management, I think it's really about mind management. So the M is mind management. You need to manage your mind. And so what I mean by that is our minds are the operating system for our life. It's how we perceive the world, it's how we make decisions, it affects how we feel. And even so, we could touch on any part of your mind, things like our self-talk, right? Our belief system. And I think managing that is important to win the day. Yes, you need a learning management process. You need to focus on the important things, but you also have to manage your mind. And because your mind is your most powerful asset, wealth and otherwise. So things like our self-talk, things like analyzing the lies that we have. It's like having a lot of, I think it's, this idea of having strong beliefs weakly held. And I don't know who to attribute that. That's not mine, but it's the idea where, our thoughts become more of our reality, but how mindful and intentional are we paying attention to our own thoughts and our own mental programming? Even when we're remembering names, I tell people that your brain is this incredible supercomputer, and your self-talk is a program it will run. So if you tell yourself, I'm not good at remembering names, you probably won't remember the name of the next person you meet, because you program your supercomputer not to. And so in Limitless, I talk about lies that we need to unravel around learning. Like things like genius is born. There are a lot of people who believe that you're just born with genius or you're not. And, I give evidence that genius is built. And what does that allow you to do? It allows you to say, like, okay, your intelligence is not fixed like your shoe size. You could actually grow it through your own study and discipline and so on. So like another lie is that a lot of people believe is knowledge is power. And it just simply isn't, right? Knowledge has the potential to be power. It becomes power when we apply it and we utilize it, right? A lot of people know what to do. They're very knowledgeable, but they're not doing what they know.
Yeah.
And so that's another lie, but it comes down to managing our mind. And so I feel like it's important, while the importance we're looking at our values for managing our mind, I think it's important to sensitize ourselves to our self-talk, because it's hard for a negative mind to create a positive life, right? When you're always asking like, why me? Or looking for evidence, why does this always happen to me? Why am I not enough? And then we come up with these answers that are not probably the most useful.
Yeah.
And so also analyzing our beliefs, like when's the last time, like when I was 9 years old, a teacher pointed to me in front of the whole class and said, leave that kid alone. That's the boy with the broken brain. And then that was imprinted, that idea that I was broken, but I held on to that for another decade and a half.
I was going to ask you that, Jim, actually. I noticed that when you mentioned that at the start, that is a powerful message to be given at that age, right? So you talk a lot about this empowering mindset, positive self-talk. How did you go about changing your self-talk after such a powerful and influential experience? Did you believe you had a broken brain for many years?
I believed it. And so then my question became, how do I fix it? So my mind management, and maybe it was inspired by my parents. Like my parents, they're not the wealthiest by any stretch, or the smartest, or they're not the most spiritual, and they're not the most health conscious, but they're just really I'm blessed because I feel like I won the lottery. They're just very good people. They're hardworking and they're extremely kind, right? And to honor my parents, I feel like when I was growing up, and I'm the oldest of 3 siblings. I wanted to be a good role model for my brother and my sister also as well, because those are my value system, my family, right, in terms of love. And so I guess what got me through this is I wanted to be valuable like we all do. And so it got me through those tough times, but it wasn't easy, right? Like the daily saying to yourself, I would say like, oh, because I'm broken. But then I started asking, well, broke things, you could fix broke. Can you fix something that's broken? And then I asked, well, how do I make this better? How do I fix this? And then I started getting answers slowly. And with those answers came action. And so I feel like the things that happen to us, you know, this idea where maybe it's not happening to you, it's happening for you, that there's this gift through struggle. Like my 2 biggest challenges were learning, and because of it, public speaking, because I never knew the answer. So don't call on me in class. If I had to give a book report, I would be terrified because I just wasn't as smart as the other kids.
I mean, it's remarkable to hear that, because if you go on YouTube and type in your name, there are countless videos of you on stage,
public speaking on learning
in front of hundreds of people in really nice venues, and you are giving really commanding and very grounded performances on stage. And the reason I share that, Jim, is I think that's empowering, because if you can change from being the kid with the broken brain to being this confident, sought after speaker, I think that journey is inspiring for people who might think at the moment, well, I've got negative self-talk.
Yeah.
I'm scared of even going to my work and having to present in front of my colleagues, right? There'll be people listening right now who feel like that.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, how do they start changing it? Is simply, you know, asking some of these questions we've already covered. Is that how they do it? Is just becoming aware of it? I mean, what do you recommend?
So I think awareness is a starting point for any kind of change. I would also say that a reminder, as we're mapping out this process of transformation, wherever you are, where you want to be, that the people you look up to, every professional was once an amateur, right? You know, every expert was once a beginner, because everybody starts at that place, right? And so I would remind people that our struggles can become strengths. And again, my 2 biggest challenges were learning and public speaking, and all I do is public speak on this thing called learning. But adversity can be an advantage because it forces you to grow, and with challenge again comes change. And I think also on another level, we're best suited to support the person we once were, right? So when I feel like when I'm talking to that 9-year-old that was going through, that was in despair, that didn't believe in himself, that had learning difficulties, that was called broken. And I think we're all really well suited to support the person we once were. So I think all change begins with a choice. There's a quote in Limitless that says, life is the letter C between B and D, where B stands for birth and D stands for death, and life C is choice. And in these difficult times, they could distract you, or these difficult times, they can diminish you, or these difficult times, they can develop you. We decide with the choices that we make. And one of those choices we make is in the area of our mind, like what we're thinking, what we're going to choose to believe, those paradigms and perceptions, frameworks that we have in the world that informs like what we're going to do and how we're going to feel. But it is interesting to reflect, looking backwards, that not everything makes sense like when you're going through it. Yeah. It's been my experience, though, with hindsight, of course, that when you look back, that maybe things, I wish this for so many people listening, that I hope if you're going through struggles, that you're going through a storm, that when you look sometime in the future, you look back knowing why it happened the way it did. And to another level, maybe even are grateful certain things happened the way they did.
Yeah.
It's like post-traumatic stress we talked about last time, post-traumatic growth. That's this psychological phenomenon that you went through adversity, you wouldn't wish upon anybody, but you wouldn't change it for yourself because you discovered something. You discovered a purpose or a mission or a meaning or a strength or a trait that you didn't realize that you had.
I mean, that word choice, I think, is one of the most important words for us to sit with.
Yeah.
everything is a choice. You know, you can be someone who thinks you are, you know, a victim to the world, right?
Yeah.
Or, as you say, you could say that actually it's happening for me, not to me. And that is a choice, right? You can justify it the other way and go, no, that's not true because you don't know my life. Sure. But it's not about whether we've had a hard start or challenges in our life. Everyone or many people will have a totally valid story of that. It's not saying that's not true. For me, it's about what good is that disempowering story doing for you? How does it help you? Right? Yeah, you had a bad start in life. I have real sympathy for that. Okay. I wish you didn't. But at the same time, if you want to change things, you have to think about that C word choice and go, I have a choice with how I look at this. What is the upside? What have I learned that I would not have learned had this not happened to me? And once you start practicing doing that, I think journaling is a great tool for people to do this on a regular basis. You start to do it automatically. Like I really feel, Jim, I've got to the point where most adverse situations, I can now pretty quickly flip it and go, okay, but what's the upside here?
Where's the gift?
Where's the gift?
Yeah, what can I learn from this?
Because there always is. It doesn't mean it ain't hard.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Then no one's saying it's not hard and it isn't, you know, causes sadness and all kinds of things. But there is a choice and you can choose to live life with that mindset.
So that I would categorize all this under mind management. You are managing your mind and not at the effect of what's going on in your environment, right? You're determining your own reality with the choices that you're making. And part of the choices we're making is what to focus on, what questions we're asking ourselves. Like, where's the gift in this? Right? And like, what can I learn from this? This is managing your mind. And I feel like, again, a negative mind can't create a positive life. And not that I want to be all just positive all the time either, right? You have to look at reality. Sometimes you can be so positive that things are going to work out and you don't take the necessary actions when your health or your family, your business or whatever. And so it is making those choices. And the choices, I want to remind people also, there's only 4 choices you can make. When I was thinking about this the other day on the train, I was thinking, if you want to create a new result in your life, which most of us do, you have to make a new choice, right? And I believe all behavior is belief-driven, right? You need a belief that says that's even possible. But going on the choices, there are only 4 fundamental choices to make a change. You either could stop something, you could start something, you could do less of something, or you could do more of something. That's literally the only things you could do. Because if you did the 5th thing is not do anything, that's insanity, right? Doing the same thing, expecting a different result. So you want to create a new result. Let's say it's wellness. You can either stop something, start something, do less of something, do more of something. You could stop smoking, right? You could start meditating. You could do less binge watching television sitcoms, or you could do more movement throughout the day. Right. And so like all those choices, and I'm not saying this is easy, but I'm saying it is pretty straightforward and simple. And so when I'm looking at how to make my life better, I could ask myself these kind of questions like, what is this good for my brain or is this bad for my brain? Something simple. Or, the questions that you're asking yourself, where's the gift in this? And then I could ask, what can I stop? What can I start? What can I do less of? What can I do more of? And those little things add up to big things over time because that consistency compounds.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the importance of mastering your mind because it gives you awareness and it reminds you you have agency.
Yeah.
Right? That you don't have to believe everything that you're thinking.
Before we get to the I of limitless, I was just thinking, Jim, that at the start of this conversation, we both were sharing how life is short, time is limited. Let's not waste our days away. Let's look after our brains. Let's be intentional and live lives to our fullest potential as much as we can, right? You mentioned some sort of habits there, right? Which are really interesting to me. And I wanted to know, what do you think are some of the common habits that people all over the world now are engaging in each day that have been detrimental to their brain health? Ever have one of those days when everything seems to go wrong, and before you know it, you've slipped back into those habits you're trying so hard to avoid, like sugar, doom scrolling, and wine? When it comes to making changes in our lives that actually last, most people think the solution is to try harder, but this is simply not the case. In my new book, Make Change That Lasts, I reveal how exactly you can break free from the habits that hold you back. What many of us don't realize is that our behaviors follow our beliefs. So when you change your beliefs, and my book will show you how to do that, you'll spend less time having to think about your habits because they'll happen automatically. Make Change That Lasts, the #1 Sunday Times bestseller, is available to buy now all over the world as a paperback, ebook, and as an audiobook, which I am narrating. And if you've not got your copy yet, what are you waiting for? Just taking a quick break to give a shout out to AG1, one of the sponsors of today's show. Now, AG1 has been in my own life for over 5 years now. It is a science-driven daily health drink with over 70 essential nutrients to support your overall health. It contains vitamin C and zinc, which helps support a healthy immune system, something that is really important, especially at this time of year. It also contains prebiotics and digestive enzymes that help support your gut health. And all this goodness comes in one convenient daily serving that makes it really easy to fit into your life. No matter how busy you feel, it's also really tasty as well. Now, the scientific team behind AG1 includes experts from a broad range of fields, including longevity, preventive medicine, genetics, and biochemistry. And I talk to them regularly, and I'm really impressed with their commitment to making a top quality product. For listeners of my podcast, AG1 are giving a special exclusive offer. You can get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and K2 and 5 free travel packs with your first order. These packs are perfect for keeping in your backpack, office, or car. If you want to give them a try, just go to drinkag1.com/live more.
This actually leads to the I. The I is implementation management.
Okay.
And so the idea here is that is the things you're doing, which would include your habits. University studies suggest about 40% of our day is spent habitual.
Yeah.
Like mindless. We're just going through a routine, but we're not thoughtful about it because we're on autopilot, right? And so implementation management is managing your actions and your own behaviors, which would include your habits because that's habitual. And so the idea is you create your habits and your habits create you. And also habits could also be giving you a negative result, certainly as well. There are certain things that we're doing that we could stop or do less of, right?
Okay.
The choices. And then you could always do the opposite. You could do, start something new or do more of something that's positive. I would say the diet, right? What you eat matters, especially for your gray matter. So I would say on the opposite side of all the brain foods that we talk about, like avocados and blueberries and so on, I would say, the processed food, refined foods, a lot of chemicals in foods, the high sugar, the glucose spikes, that's something that can be detrimental to our brain, right? Second thing, negative self-talk. When we say, why me? Why does this always happen to me? Why am I not enough? I'm not that smart, whatever it happens to be. People at events, they say that to me all the time because they know I'm a memory coach, and they say, they come to me and say, Jim, I think I'm getting too old. I have a horrible memory. And I always say, same thing, stop. If you fight for your limitations, you get to keep them, right? And so the idea here is negative self-talk could be detrimental. Third thing, being sedentary, right? We live behind screens. I don't know about most people, but I do. And we're not moving. And the number one reason, I want to remind everyone, the number one reason we have a brain, its number one function is to control our movement. And as your body moves, your brain grooves. And so I would say something that's negative, a negative habit is not moving.
Yeah.
You know, they say sitting is the new smoking. But when we exercise, we create, BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factors, which is like fertilizer for your brain for neuroplasticity. When we exercise, create dopamine, serotonin, endorphins, these important neurotransmitters and substances that are really good for cognitive health and cognitive performance. When we move, we create blood flow, so it's more oxygen to your brain. I mean, there's so many benefits. It reduces stress and so on. So being sedentary. I would also say being around negative people is not good, so much good for your brain. We all know that sometimes you spend time with people, and I don't know if you ever noticed, like some people, it seems like batteries are included, but there are a few people that batteries just were not included. And they like take all your energy and your drive and your motivation and your creativity. So I would say who we spend time with is who we become.
Yeah.
And being around people that are not who you want to be like, or aspects of them that they don't inspire you. I mean, we all need people to cheerlead for us, to be kind to us, to encourage us. And if you haven't found that person, be that person. Be that person for somebody else. Be that person, especially for yourself. So a negative peer group. And again, those people could be your family. It could be your friends, people closest to you. And they could be sincere, but they could be sincerely wrong too. They could have good intentions. Maybe they're like, why you always listen to those podcasts and reading all those books or whatever. And maybe they don't want, deep down, there's a secondary gain. They don't want you to outgrow them because they don't want to be separate from you. So it can be good intentions, or maybe they don't want you to get your hopes up, or, and they're trying to protect you.
It's funny, thinking about podcasting and a couple of things you've said. Earlier on, you were talking about the importance of learning, and people who listen to podcasts like this one or yours or many others are making a commitment to learning, right? Especially these kind of, these sort of podcasts. It is about learning information and hopefully implementing elements of that, or at least getting you thinking and learning new things about the world, right? So I think that's important. But I kind of feel, would podcasting have blown up the way it has if people weren't as isolated as they are around the world? I really think about that a lot. If we had really strong, cohesive communities, I wonder sometimes if, I don't think it's clear cut or black and white, but I do believe that some people don't have their own peer networks that support them. And so they will, let's say, listen to this show each week, and hopefully it's done in such a way that they feel like it's a couple of friends talking and it's a friend of theirs who's talking. I generally feel that people start to develop that connection to their favorite podcast host. I certainly do with the podcast I like to listen to. You feel like that person's almost your friend and that you know them. So I actually think they, in some ways, help us feel connected and help us feel as though, you know what, there are people out there who think like me. Because I think a lot of the time people are in work environments or family environments who are not as interested in health and growth and well-being. And so I think podcasting helps. I'm doing a UK theatre tour next year.
Oh, wow.
And, trying to create something really special, unlike anything I've ever done before. Something immersive and transformative with lights and music. Yeah, really, we're working hard on it. And one of the reasons is because I think we want to be surrounded by people who think like us and want to grow like us. And there's power in being around other people, isn't there?
I feel like we want to know that we're not alone.
Yeah.
Right. And just in our identity and who we are. I mean, I feel like we want to fit in and belong, and we want to stand out at the same time. Right. There's this pendulum where we want to belong and be part of something, be understood, be seen, not feel like we're kind of weird. But when you get to be around other people who think similar, it can be great. And then also we want to also stand out, because that's why we grow in our specific traits. With our friends and family, sometimes the people that we care about most are the ones that hold us back, because we give them permission and we give up our sovereignty to their expectations and opinions. And I want us to remind everyone, you could love your family, but they don't have to be your peers. Like when I say have a positive peer group, I'm saying self-selecting individuals that their opinion affects how you feel, and affect your standards, right? Meaning, I have this rule that just don't take criticism from someone you wouldn't take advice from. Don't take criticism, because like a lot of us are fearful of other people's opinions and expectations. But if you want to do anything in your life, there's this judgment that comes around it, and people have their opinions, especially on social media. And we could decide and hold that internal reality that, we will work on having the people around us that we could identify with, that, that they can relate to, that inspire them. And I certainly have, people like that also as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, going back to the habits, this is just all about implementation. And so implementation management is managing the things and getting yourself to do the things you need to do, even if they're difficult.
You mentioned some of the habits that people are engaging with that are maybe sabotaging their day-to-day lives in many ways, that are stealing their life away without them realizing. If we flip that and think about, look, you have so many habits you recommend to people. We covered loads in the first conversation, but I don't know, if I said to you, Jim, what are 3 of your favorite pro-brain habits that people could do? How would you answer that?
Let me give you a few more of the negative habits, and then because that'll inform the positive ones.
Sure.
So we talked about a bad brain diet, is probably not good for your brain. Definitely negative thinking is a habit. Habits of thought. Not moving is a habit, being sedentary. So obviously the opposite of all these make a difference. A positive peer group is good, but a negative peer group could affect your words, your actions, your thoughts, your character, your habits. A dirty environment. We don't think about our environment as much, but our external reality affects our internal reality. So you notice, like, you clean your desk or you put everything in the right folder on your computer, you have clarity of thought. But a messy environment, it reflects, you have to use so much energy to hold like where everything is.
Yeah, for sure.
And I feel like that wouldn't be a good use of our brain. So a negative habit would be, sustaining a dirty environment. Head injuries, I would put that up there, because I get to work with a lot of extreme athletes, or, UFC fighters, or football players, and, hockey players that have had head trauma. Not learning something is not good for your brain. So be like, just, if you're not learning, you're not growing, you're not challenging. And so like our brains are like, it's an organ, but it acts like a muscle. It's use it or lose it. And so I would say not learning every day could affect your brain. And that's a habit. And then being stressed all the time could affect our brain. Whatever emotional stress, financial stress, whatever the stressors are, chronic stress has been shown to shrink the human brain. And so not having coping mechanisms for me, so though, to answer your question, like habits that have really helped me of late, I would say spending more time in nature, because I'm not on my screen. Nature is very healing, clean air, better lighting. I feel grounded. It reduces my stress. I also could do that with my family. So it's family time, or walking the dogs, things like that. So I would say that's good. I would put one more negative habit on there, besides the things we've talked about in the last episode, like touching your phone at night or in the first thing in the morning, all those things. Anything that would affect your sleep. That's any habits that would negatively impact your rest and recovery at night. And that could be a habit of drinking caffeine later in the afternoon. It could be, being on screens, certainly also as well. It could be ruminating, which is a habit of like all the things you need to do or all the things that worry you. And I'm not saying, again, it's easy to mitigate these things, but the self-awareness is a starting point for all change again. So good habits for me, being out in nature, going to bed at the same time is so very important to me. I mean, I don't know. It took me I'm turning 51. It took me like a long time to get to the point where I'm just okay with going to bed at like 9:30. And, so like for me,
welcome to my world, man.
yes,
I love it.
I mean, and a lot of this, the impetus was having a 1-year-old because, we're just exhausted and he wakes up in the middle of the night. And so we want to sleep closer to when he's sleeping. But the idea here is prioritizing your sleep. So nature, going to bed at the same time each night, even on weekends, and no one's perfect about it, but it's made a big difference in my life. And then the last thing I would say for my brain, and there's tons of stuff that on our podcast in the book, like literally I could spout off 200 different habits.
Yeah.
The habit of looking for joy. I mean, I have this question, this thing I talk about called the dominant question, and we mentioned it very, very briefly in our first conversation. But when I was with Will Smith, I train a lot of actors how to speed read scripts, memorize their lines, be focused on set. And this dominant question and idea is like we have 60,000 thoughts on average a day. A lot of those thoughts come in the form of questions, and there's certain questions we ask all the time that we don't consciously and unconsciously. And those questions determine our reality. And his dominant question we found out is, how do I make this moment magical? And he gets answers, right? And then I was like, okay, my dominant question is, how do we make it better? So how do we make this question better? And he was like, okay, instead of how do I make this moment magical, how about how do I make this moment even more magical? With the presupposition being this moment's already magical.
And
right?
This is a question he consciously asks himself, or he's programmed himself to ask?
Both. Oh, no, I don't know if it was programmed, but and it explains a lot of like when we're shooting in Toronto, a superhero film, and it was like 2:00 at night. It was a night shoot. And it's not very glamorous. It's cold. It's in February in Canada. And, but his family and I are in a tent, shivering a little bit, watching the screens. And during the break, he's making us hot chocolate, even though there's a crew that would do that. And he starts telling us stories and cracking jokes. And that's a result of that dominant question. How do I make this moment even more magical, right? And I'll talk about the power of questions in another letter that's coming up for limitless in the acronym. But the idea here is that one of my habits is just trying to find more joy, more magic. And I think what we look for, we're more likely to find. It's like that, what's that red car experiment. It's like, you see, if I asked everybody, like in the past 24 hours, how many red cars they saw on the way to home or work, you're like, I don't know how many, but you probably saw them, yes. But if you're offered somebody, $100 for every single red car they saw, they'd be very clear in seeing the red cars. And I feel like there's a lot of things we could be grateful for at any given time, but we're not asking those questions.
I think that's such a key point when we think about joy or gratitude or how do you make this moment magical.
Yeah.
Like literally in the last week, my daughter has been doing this game with me. Like, I don't think this game existed when I was at school, but it's something to do with when you see a Mini in the road, like the car, a Mini, you sort of give someone a gentle punch and you say a few things. Now, it's nuts because I didn't know there were that many Minis on the road, right? But suddenly you're playing that game, you're seeing Minis everywhere. And now when I'm not in the car with my daughter, I am seeing Minis everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Those Minis have just not suddenly appeared on the road, right? It's your awareness, the intention has been put out that you're looking for Minis.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of same thing with negativity or positivity, right? You can train your brain to start looking for joy. You can train your brain to be grateful, but you got to set the intention.
I love that. I think everyone would benefit from making that a habit. and habitual things. Like even asking that question is, what can I be grateful for, in this moment? It just sensitized you to see more minis. That's always there, but we weren't paying attention. Your brain primarily is a deletion device. It's trying to keep information out. If we let everything in, there's a billion stimuli that would overload us, right? But when you ask questions, we activate that reticular activating system, which is like a spotlight, and so you start seeing what you're asking for. And I think that's a great habit to be in. Gratitude habit is so good for your brain because it gets you out of fear and gets you out of stress. Because again, chronic stress shrinks your brain. Chronic fear, will make you more susceptible. The colds, the flus, the virus will compromise your immune system. But I think gratitude is an incredible antidote. And so you can even do a thought experiment. It's like, what if the only things you had in your life tomorrow were the things you express gratitude for today? Like, wow, that would change things for me, at least. Like I'd be expressing my gratitude for all the little things because I wouldn't want to lose them the next day. But also the act of expressing it as a habit, I'll feel, the benefit that comes with it also.
Okay.
So that's implementation.
Okay.
The T in limitless is time management. So there are ways of managing your time and time management systems. I make them one of the 9 elements of management because I feel like you can be really good at managing your time, but if you're not good at managing your priorities or managing your mind or managing, like your growth, then I feel like it's only one aspect. And there's different systems. For me, when I think about time management, I'm looking at decision fatigue. This idea that you can only make a certain amount of good decisions in a day. And then after you've used them up, you can't. Have you ever been at a restaurant at like dinner time and you're looking at a menu and you don't even know what you want because you're just spent mentally?
100%.
Right. And so the idea here is systemize your life as much as possible so you don't have to make decisions on what you're going to eat that day or plan to wear or whatever. And then you can save those good decisions for things that matter. Right. So if you have systemized way of food prep or, getting food delivered, whatever you happen to do, you don't have to spend a lot of energy. And so because there's a big cognitive load, and cost to a lot of this. For time management, I like to do something called task batching, where I batch a lot of the similar tasks together as best I can. And obviously everybody has a dynamic life and family and responsibilities and appointments. So you can't always do that. But to the best of my ability, I like to chunk my communications, for example, all at the same time. Or, when I do podcasting and interviews, it's only, a certain amount of hours in a day or a specific day, where I do all my communication, to catch up for things.
We don't realize the cost of switching
huge costs.
Tasks, do we?
Yeah. So it's, again, the task switching, there's 3 costs, I would say. So you're not multitasking, you're task switching. And this is an argument for monotasking, like focusing on one thing. First, we lose time. Whenever we're task switching, it takes 5-10 minutes when you're going from one activity to another to regain your focus, right? So you're losing time. The thing you think you're gaining by multitasking, quote unquote, which again is a myth, is time. The second thing, mistakes. Whenever you're trying to multitask, you're going to make more mistakes. I mean, think about somebody texting and driving, right? Like you're going to have more accidents for sure, right? You're doing 2 cognitive activities at once.
I mean, if you just think about that for a minute, it's the most ridiculous thing in the world to text and drive.
Yeah.
Yet most people or many people have done it and continue to do it. But if you actually step back and think about it, you're like, this is the craziest thing in the world.
Yeah. But think about how our devices are rewiring our brains like all the time. How many times do people open up their phones? And that's why if you don't set constraints or borders or guardrails around these things, then the technology uses us. Right? Especially when we're picking up our devices out of boredom. Like if you're online or whatever, and I understand if you have to do some work, and I totally understand especially if your career or your school, whatever it's or you have to be in touch with your family, totally understand that. But a lot of us are doing it just out of mindlessness, right? And then, or out of boredom, just to get that dopamine hit. And we can't even be quiet. Like while we're waiting in line for, whatever we're going to eat or mailing something at the post office, whatever. So, that could be a challenge. But going back to time management, like I do task batching because the third challenge with task switching not only does waste time, you make more mistakes, it uses up a lot of energy. Like if you're focused on an activity like reading or whatever, a certain part of your brain is lit up, right? Imagine a cognitive web. And in order to go from that to like going to Slack or social media, whatever, you got to shut this part of your brain down and then re-engage. And it uses a lot of blood glucose, right? And then we feel like we have too many tabs open and we wonder why we're just spent and depleted. And maybe because we're trying to do too many things at the same time. And so when it comes to time management, I like to batch my tasks, similar tasks together so I could just kind of stay more in a flow. And, so I do my communications at a certain amount of hours or certain days. And it just works really well for me. I mentioned I break my day into 3 areas. In the morning, I create. In the afternoon, I consume. And in the evening, I clear. Right. So in the morning, I want to pull out information out of my mind. I'm most creative. I write, I script podcasts and so on. In the afternoon, I consume. I'm reading research, I'm reading books, listen to podcasts, listen to audiobooks. I'm putting information in. And in the evening, I want to get in that parasympathetic rest, digest. I want to sleep well. I clear. What is that? I could, talk to my wife about my day. It's a way of clearing. I could plan my day out the next day to get that out of my head so I don't have to ruminate it.
And just on that, Jim, for anyone who might be thinking, well, Jim, I don't have that kind of autonomy over my day. I guess if someone's got a conventional, which I guess is becoming less conventional these days, 9 to 5, let's say, or 8 till 6. Yeah. I guess there are ways of applying those principles, so they could, if they can get up and spend 10, 20 minutes in the morning focusing on themselves, they could be reading, for example, and learning first thing in the morning. When they get home, they could do, as you say, talk to their partner if they have one, or journal, or, there's a way of applying it, even if you don't have the autonomy that you might have, for example.
Completely. And that's why I said I never perfect, because there's always days where I have to do an interview or have a doctor and what I have to take my
But it's your intention.
So I'm not asking people to model the process. I'm asking people to look at the principle. Yeah. Because behind every principle, there's a promise. So the idea behind the principle we're talking about is, to the best of our ability, to be most efficient and effective and have more enjoyment also, because it's less taxing, less stress, is to batch similar activities together. And nobody ever gets 100%. I've never had that experience ever in my life. But the idea here is, if you're doing certain things, do one at a time. And if you can stack the things that are similar together, you're going to be more productive and you'll get more out of the day. You won't waste as much time. You won't make as many mistakes, and you have more energy. Yeah. And another, like, time management is things like the Pareto principle. I mean, it kind of overlaps a little bit with importance management, but the Pareto principle is the 80-20 rule, right? You focus on the 20% of your time management, to 20%, that gives you 80% of the results, right? There's 20% of what you're eating that's giving you 80% of your health. There's 20% of the people that give you 80% of the happiness, and so on. Focusing on that 20%, as opposed to focusing on the 80% that gives you only 20% of the returns, right? Because that's marginal returns. Also, there's an Eisenhower matrix, for those of you familiar with it, based on importance and urgency. So imagine a quadrant, 4 quadrants, and as things go up, it's more important. And as things go left, it's more urgent. And so if you see the quadrants, the bottom right is not important and not urgent. That's probably, you should delete everything in that category, right? If you're on the bottom left, then it is urgent and unimportant. I would say for that, if it's urgent but it's not important to you, the second D is delegate, right? You delegate the things that are in that box. If you go directly up, top left, those are things that are urgent and important, right? So in that area, the D is you do it. If it's urgent and important, you do it, right? And then finally, the top right, which I'm hoping is where most of us spend time with, it's important, but it's not urgent. Like eating a good meal is important, but it's not urgent, right? But if you don't do it regularly, it becomes urgent, right? Because then you're in a health crisis.
Yeah.
Like your relationships are important, maybe not urgent, but if you neglect it, then it becomes urgent. It goes in the top left quadrant.
You've got this matrix in Limitless, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then yes. And then the top right is, since it's not urgent and it's important, then you could, the D could be you decide or you defer it, meaning you schedule it. Right. But this is just another model, Eisenhower matrix. So I didn't create it, but it's a model for time management to be able to know where to put your time. So under time management, I'm thinking about task batching. I'm thinking about the Eisenhower matrix in terms of urgency and importance. Even the things like the Pomodoro technique that says you can only work 25, 45 minutes before your mental energy just kind of declines. So the idea here is every half an hour, take a 5-minute brain break and that's good for time management, also as well, to kind of refresh your mind.
Yeah. And I think that's one thing that in this culture of busyness and urgency and everything's important and needs to get done now, people forget about the importance of breaks. Mm-hmm. They keep pushing through, working through their lunch break, thinking that actually it's helping.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that actually 5 minutes, if you've got a garden or get out of your office, look at the sky, look at the trees, go for a walk up and down the stairs. When you come back, you're going to be recharged and get more done than had you just try to work through. I just still don't think people get that.
Absolutely. You have to disconnect to reconnect. And it's like even the race cars, they do a pit stop so they could just check everything, recoup, and then go and fire on all cylinders. So I agree. Also for your memory, because for people like, say, I don't know how you were in med school, but a lot of people cram, right? They pull all-nighters. And imagine studying for 7 hours straight with no breaks. There's a principle in memory, principles called recency and primacy. Recency says you tend to remember something in the beginning of something. Primacy is you remember something in the beginning. Recency, you tend to remember things at the end or more recent. So the idea here is if you go to a party and meet 20 people, you probably remember the first people that you met there and the last people you met there. Primacy and recency. If I gave you a list of 20 random words, you probably remember the first few words and the last few words, right? Primacy and recency. So the idea here, though, the challenge, though, is like if you study 8 hours without any breaks, all other things being equal, you remember things in the beginning and things at the end, but there's a huge dip in the between. Now, change that to taking a break every hour. Not only does your brain get a reset and a recharge, but you create more primacies and recencies. You create more starts and stops, right? So you get to pick up a lot of that information and learning in between.
Yeah, love that. Loads of techniques there for us to experiment with.
I would challenge everybody to. The Pomodoro is like a tomato, right? So it's like I have a tomato timer analog, like a cooking timer from the kitchen. I set it for 45 minutes and I just do my deep work. Then I take a 5-minute brain break, another 45 minutes, and it works.
So you don't wait for you to feel it. You get on top of it and go, no, I'm at 45 minutes. I'm taking a break.
Yeah. And I decide at the end of 45 minutes, because if I'm in a flow state, like I'm getting there, then I just will keep on going until I see some kind of diminishing return in my energy level, in my focus, in my creativity, whatever I happen to be doing. I'm going to be sensitized to that, but I don't want to push through to a point where I can't recover. Yeah. So that works for me. That works for me extremely well.
Okay. We're just over halfway through your limitless model, right? We've done LIMIT. What is L?
The second L is lens. And what I mean by that is lens management. Lens, for me, is a tool to focus. All right. So this is like your focus management. Mm-hmm. You have to manage your focus because your focus is reality. If people want to remember names, it requires focus. If people want to remember what they read, it requires focus. Because if you aren't focusing on when you're hearing the name, you're not going to remember the name. If you read a page in a book, get to the end and forget what you just read, you don't have focus, because focus will give you the comprehension and the retention that you want. Now, when I say lens, it's interesting. Like I don't know if you did this. When I was a kid in the summertime, I would take out like a magnifying glass, a lens, and people would burn things, right? Like leaves or whatever. And I would do that. And I found it really interesting because that point that's doing the burning, it's very sharp, it's very bright. And isn't it interesting the words we choose to use to describe people? If we say somebody is sharp, we say they're bright, what are we implying? That they are smart, right? That they are intelligent. Someone's bright, they're intelligent. Maybe they're not smarter, maybe they're just better focused, right? But what that lens is doing. So lens management is focus management. And I think it's important to manage your focus. And one of the best ways of doing that we talked about is asking questions, right? Questions are an incredible focusing tool. It's like you ask yourself, like, where are the minis, right? And you ask that question repeatedly. It becomes almost a dominant question. So you start seeing minis everywhere. Did they magically manifest in your neighborhood? No, they were always there. But as I mentioned, your brain is a deletion device. It's trying to keep most information out. It only lets in the things that are important to you. And how do you let it know it's important? You ask questions, because that means you're interested and there's some kind of emotion, but payoff on it.
And that's why I love that question each morning. What is the most important thing I need to do today?
Yeah.
Because just imagine you do that every day. That quickly builds up, right?
Yeah.
It very quickly adds up. That means each day you've directed your focus going, this is important. Hopefully you complete that task, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
You do that for 365 days.
Oh my goodness.
That's a lot of important things that you've done.
Yeah.
And it's, again, yes, it speaks to importance management, the eye, but it also speaks to lens and directing your focus.
Even when you're reading a book, right? And we talked about this in the last episode on speed reading and smart reading. If you ever read a page in a book, got to the end and just forgot what you just read, I guarantee you don't have enough questions. Because if you had questions about what you're reading, like how does this relate to what I already know? How am I going to use this? Whatever your questions are, then you'll be reading it and you're like, oh, there's a mini, there's a mini, there's a mini.
Don't you have, I think I saw this one of your videos, Jim, like a lot of people listen to this show because they want to live a healthier and happier life.
Yeah.
And often they're thinking about habits that they can implement into their life. I think you have something where you say for any habit you want to bring into your life, you've got to ask yourself 3 questions. Is that ringing a bell?
Yeah. I mean, for learning especially, when we talked about earlier that knowledge is not power, it's a potentially power, it becomes power when we apply it. I think how we take knowledge and turn it into action, the 3 questions I ask when I'm learning something, and I can give you questions for every kind of situation that I ask myself. When I'm learning specifically, I'm asking, how can I use this? Mm-hmm. Because when I'm reading, it engages my focus. So if we're talking about lens management, the questions are dictating, I get pulled through what I need to. I'm pulling it in. Like you can't push a rope. If you like, you can't push this, but you could pull it, right? And so the idea here is the questions pull information in. So I ask myself, how can I use this? Then I ask myself, why must I use this? So it goes from my head to my heart. Then the third question is when? When will I use it? Again, one of the most important productivity performance tools you have is your calendar. But I think for every hour people spend listening to this conversation or reading a book or whatever, a general rule is to spend an equal hour putting it into action, right? You spend an hour listening to a podcast, at least spend another hour or some time putting it into play.
Yeah, I think those questions are brilliant because yes, it applies to learning. It applies to a habit that they hear, right? They think, oh, that sounds interesting. Okay, how can I use this habit? Okay, that's getting them to think a little bit. Yeah. Why must I use it?
Yeah, because without that why, without reasons, you won't get the results. Even if people forget names, yes, part of it is what we talked about, their attention. They're not focused on the name. But part of it is there's no emotion. Like, why do you want to remember the person's name?
Yeah.
Maybe it's to show the person respect. Maybe it's to get a referral. Maybe it's to do a sale. Maybe it's to practice these things I learned on the podcast.
And then it's when will. when will I?
Yeah.
Okay.
So then it goes from your head to your heart to your hands, meaning, how can I use this? You're coming up with all the ideas in your head. Why must I use this? Right? The heart. And then the hands. When?
Yeah.
When am I going to act on this? And so I feel like when you have those three things in play, there's less friction.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
To learn something, to do anything at all, or even to take some kind of action that you need to take that's, might be even uncomfortable. But the lens, the idea behind this, again, is one of the tools we have to focus our lens is the power of questions. Like even going back to some of the other management, like the importance management, you could ask yourself, use your lens in your mind management to say, what's the best use of this moment, right? Like something like that just changes it. You take a pause and you're like, okay, it recenters you on what's most important. Or questions like Peter Thiel has this question, who's an angel investor, says, what if I had to reach my 10-year goal, but I only had 6 months to do it? That's a different kind of question because you can't possibly work hard enough to do it in 6 months. So you have to ask a new question to be able to get to that goal, right? So questions, I believe, are the answer.
In the chapter on thinking towards the end of Limitless, there's a lot of that in there, which I find really, really interesting. Okay, what's the E?
Yeah, so the E in Limitless is energy management. If you want to get the most out of the day, you need energy. And I just want to remind everybody that you don't have energy, you do it. So we talked about this in the earlier episode. Take the nouns in your life and turn them into verbs, meaning sometimes we hypnotize ourselves into submission and we say, I don't have motivation today. I don't have energy. I don't have focus. I don't have a good memory. These are not things you have. These are things you do. And the benefit of turning it into a verb, a process, is you get your agency back. Right. We talked a lot about in the previous episode about personal responsibility, right? And having agency and being a thermostat, not a thermometer, right? A thermometer reacts to the environment, a thermostat sets the environment, right? It knows the temperature, but it also sets a standard and the environment reacts to it. And we want to act more like a thermostat because we are the pilot of our lives. We're not the passengers, right? Going with the winds of wherever other people and agendas and everything moving us towards something. So you take the nouns, you turn them to verbs. You don't have focus. There's a process for focusing. You don't have a memory. There's a process for memorizing something that we teach. You don't even have energy. You generate energy. So when I say energy management, in order to win the day, you need high levels of energy. And then, so that's where the opposite of everything I talked about earlier about the bad habits is, instead of having a bad brain diet, have a good brain diet, right? Instead of, all those negative thoughts, have some empowering thoughts, because that energizes, that's a higher vibration, right? Instead of being sedentary, you move, right? And movement generates energy.
It does.
And then supplementation. There's supplements. We have a whole new chapter in the book on nootropics, neuronutrition, where cognitive health comes from that brain foods. Right, the avocados, the blueberries, the wild salmon, the turmeric, the green leafy vegetables. If your diet allows the eggs, the choline in eggs, the acetylcholine leads to good brain health, cognitive health, for good cognitive health. And if you don't get those, if you're not getting the wild salmon or the sardines or the flax seeds, you could supplement with omega-3, DHAs, right? If you're not getting the turmeric, you supplement with curcumin. If you're not getting the eggs, you get the choline, you could supplement with choline, right? And because, we don't always eat a pristine diet, none of us really do. So you get your levels tested, your vitamin D, all the essentials for good cognitive health, right? And you supplement where needed. And there are also ingredients that have been shown through human studies to boost, that's cognitive health. This is cognitive performance.
So subtly different, right?
Yeah, that's where the nootropics would come in. These are science-based ingredients that will affect your mental performance, your executive functioning, your memory, your focus, your mood, and your mental energy, right? So it's not cognitive health. Get your foundational vitamins and minerals, essential fatty acids, and so on. Cognitive performance, there are these substances like caffeine, right? Like creatine. Most people associate creatine to working out, but it's one of the most studied substances, and it's also been shown to be really good for your cognitive health and cognitive performance, for mitochondria, for mental energy, to stave off like sleeplessness, like when you're not to be able to offset some of the negative effects of not getting a good night's sleep and so on. And some of my favorite ingredients that have been shown to boost focus, memory, mental energy. Some of them, they range. Bacopa.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's pretty popular. Some of your audience might have heard of it. Ayurvedic medicine, wonderful, great for your memory.
And there's a whole new chapter, isn't there, in Limitless? Since we last spoke, you've re-released the book it's an expanded edition.
Yeah.
And how come there's a chapter on nootropics? Is that because people were asking for that? Has there been new research?
So the book came out in 2020, which was an interesting time for a book. We recently updated it for a post-pandemic AI world. So all the original great content updated, and then we added many new chapters. A chapter on AI, how to use AI to enhance your HI, like your human intelligence. So for me, AI is not artificial intelligence, it's more augmented intelligence, right? For me, technology has always been like a support tool, something to partner with to make your life easier, right? Or better, or improve your progress. So we show people how, in that chapter, how do you use AI to enhance your intelligence, to your performance and everything. Because I think the future of education is really personalized learning. And there's different aspects of that, of using it. Even something simple like if I said something like neuroplasticity, people could go, and they don't know what that is. They could go into an AI chatbot and say, explain to me neuroplasticity in a fun way as if I'm 10 years old. And then it'll put out a couple of paragraphs and give you a foundation to build on, right? And that's a way of learning faster. And every technique in the memory technique, and the memory is probably the largest chapter in the book, memory improvement, how to remember names, languages, speeches without notes, and facts, figures. A lot of the techniques you could go into we talk about memory palaces and chain linking and story methods. You could use an AI program to say, hey, I need to memorize this. Use the memory palace, create a memory palace for me to be able to easily memorize this script.
Can I ask on memory? I know we covered a lot of it in our first conversation, but I was thinking about this yesterday, this idea that there's many things we want in life.
Yeah.
And we kind of understand that to get them, we need to work at them. For example, if we want to run faster, we don't just expect that to happen. We sort of understand that if, let's say I do a 5K every Saturday, if I want to get a faster time, I will need to do some sort of training to get that. But I kind of feel with memory, we just start to worry about it when it starts to fail, or when we perceive it to be failing. We just take it for granted. Whereas really, if memory is such an important part of our experience of life, which it is, we kind of need to be taking active steps to maintain it and improve it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I believe there's no such thing as a good or bad memory. There is a trained memory and an untrained memory. And unfortunately, like a number of important subjects, not taught in school. School taught us what to memorize, math, history, science, but there was never a class on how to memorize or how to remember. Socrates said learning is remembering. And, I wrote the chapter in Limitless on memory in Greece. I found out there was a goddess of memory, Maimonides, and her children are the 9 muses of science, literature, and art. So the 9 muses, science, literature, and art, their mother is memory.
That's cool.
And that's so important because people ask, why do I have to remember something if it's online? And I can give people a number of reasons. But in order, our lives are a reflection of the decisions we've made. We've covered that, right? The choices we've made. But you can only make a good decision based on the information that you know at that time. And if you know it, it presupposes you've remembered it, right? And there is no, Socrates said again, there is no learning without remembering. And that's why I think memory is so very important. So to go to your point, when you're talking about marathons or 5Ks or, physical fitness, I think it's very important to be mentally fit today. And memory is a big part of that. And memory, regardless, as you're listening to this, of your age or stage in life, we could all improve. And with simple things that make a big difference.
There's a game that's very popular in the UK. I think it's called I Went to the Market. Okay, and we often play it as a family. And maybe it's not from the UK, maybe it's from the US or another country. But this idea that, let's say it's my family, my daughter might start and go, I went to the market and bought an avocado. And then my wife will go, I went to the market and bought an avocado and an apple.
Yeah.
Then my son will have to do apple on, and so on. And you keep going until someone gets it wrong.
Yeah.
Is that a good game to train and practice on memory? And if it is, how might you tweak it to make it even better?
Yeah. Good question. So memory is use it or lose it. And I also believe that how you do anything is how you do everything. And so I feel like anything that challenges your brain is forcing you to make those connections and exercise your mind, right? But it's also how we're doing it. Meaning, let's say, like back in school, I wasn't good at anything. The only class I did well in, like all through grade school, was typing. And it was just because when I would visit my great aunt and uncle, they had no toys in the house. They would just have this rusty, dusty typewriter. So that's all I had to play with. And in middle school, let's say age around 12, I went to a class on typing. This was back before computers. So we had typewriters and they would rate just like how we rate people's reading speed, your typing speed. And for the first time on the chalkboard, I was number one because I was the fastest. And my name was Quick, which is my real name, my father's name, my grandma. I changed it to do what I do, to teach speed reading and speed recall and speed thinking. But I use this hunt and peck method, I invented, right? Using my 2 index fingers. And a week into it, a teacher was like, hey, we're going to teach everybody how to type. And I just wanted to take the test because this would be the first test I do well on. I was like, you don't have to teach me. I got this. But she was like, no, Jim, you have to use all your fingers, all 10 fingers, and there's home keys and everything. And I tried it. And what do you think happened to my typing speed?
Yeah.
It went down, right? Because it was awkward and it was different. And then, so what do? I go back to my hunting and pecking using my 2 fingers, right? Interesting thing happened after a week or two. Like I went from number 1 as the fastest typer to number 3 to number 7 to number 13, all the way down to the bottom because all the other kids learned it using their 10 fingers. And it took my slow brain all that time to realize, hey, that's not fair. They're using 5 times more fingers. So I have to work 5 times harder in order to keep up. But that's similar to, it's not, practice doesn't make perfect, right? Practice makes permanent. Perfect practice could potentially lead to perfection. But if we're practicing the hunt and peck method with 2 fingers, I'm only going to get as good as what I could do. And it's similar to what we talked about in the last episode about speed reading. Reading is a skill and it can be improved through training. But the last class most people took on reading, they were like 6 or 7 years old. So most people are still reading like they're 5, 6, 7 years old the same way. The difficulty and demand has increased a lot, but they read it the same way they learned it. And they can keep on practicing their old ways, but it's like practicing with 2 fingers to type. You're going to get a cap if you're because this technique is inherently limited, right? As opposed to something that's more efficient using more of your fingers. Same thing with reading. And going back to memory, yes, it's good to engage your brain by memorizing the avocados and the apples and everything else. And if you were to memorize it using a technique that you could get better at, like one of the techniques that we teach in Limitless, then you're getting really good at techniques that are at a higher level, like typing, and you could take those same techniques and use it to memorize other things.
Okay.
And that would be the benefit. So yes, I like that game. And I would just teach people a couple of quick memory techniques so they could practice that and get good at that, so they could use it to apply towards remembering what they read or remembering conversations. And
anything that you can share with us on the show at all?
For the market game?
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, I play a market game with our family, and I just put the foods on our body.
Hold on. Just on another note, if you're around at a family do with Jim Quick and we're playing a memory game, I'm thinking, what is there a bit of fear around? It's like Jim's going to crush us here.
It was a little unfair, but it's surprisingly how many of our students and my even friends are just better at certain things than I am when it comes to memory. But everyone could do this. We could play a memory game right now. I'll share my 10 favorite brain foods, and everyone can memorize them.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yeah.
All right. So we'll take 10 places, and I want everyone to do this. And even if you think you know what this is, practice makes progress. All right. So this is a wonderful opportunity to exercise your brain. So let's take 10 places on our body going from top to bottom. And you could do this with me and just say it out loud, touch that part of your body. So number 1 is top. So I want everyone to touch the top of their head and say top. Top, and that's your verbal memory. 2 is nose. So what's number 2? Nose. And then we're going right down the body. Number 3 is mouth. Say it out loud. Mouth. 4, you're going to go to the side, is your ears.
Ears.
Good. 5 is throat.
Right.
So we're exercising our memory. You remember number 1? Top.
Nose. Mouth. Ears. Throat.
Good. Number 6 are your shoulders. 6 are shoulders. So everyone listening, say it out loud. Even if there are people around you, they'll just think you're a little weird. But yeah, that's your verbal memory. 7 is collar. Good. 8 are your fingers. 9 is your belly. And 10 is your bottom. All right, so now you have 10 places, and this is a technique that's about 2,500 years old from ancient Greece. This is how they would memorize poetry, memorize speeches, using places they are familiar with. So they call this the memory palace. You're creating a place that you are very familiar with, that you can close your eyes and imagine where everything is, and you're putting the information you want to remember in those places. So you're creating like a little journey for yourself. Now, instead of using your office or the mall or your home, we're just using our body as an example. But you could use any of these. You could use your kitchen if you like. So let's go back. The first place is what? Top. And the first brain food, I'm going to go through this really rapid fire, avocados. Now, again, everyone is bio-individual, and some people could be allergic to certain things, and so everyone's a little bit different. But I'm just going to state my 10 favorite. I want you to imagine avocados on the top of your head. Okay. So here, I want everyone to pretend you're 10 years old. You're very creative. You're adding some emotion in there. Because most people forget something because they only hear it. And there's a proverb that says, what I hear, I forget. What I see, I remember. What I do, I understand. What I do and feel, I understand. I heard the name, I forgot the name. What I see, I remember. I saw the face, I remember the face. Right? And what you feel and do, you understand better. So the top, I want you to just imagine guacamole as a scalp conditioner. Right? Great. You go to your nose, and if it makes you laugh, then you're definitely going to remember it because the emotion, it'll help you remember it. The second place is what?
Nose.
Your nose. Second brain food, blueberries. I want you to imagine blueberries coming out of your nose. Even if you can't imagine it, imagine that you can imagine it. Blueberries stuck in your nose. What does that smell like? What does that feel like? I like to call them, I like to call them brain berries. They're high antioxidants and very neuroprotective. Number 3 is your mouth. Third brain foods, broccoli. There's a number of things in broccoli that good for your brain, vitamin K, the sulforaphane, which is good for cognitive health, especially if you sprout the broccoli seeds. It's like many, many, many more times sulforaphane. But broccoli stuck in your teeth. But you could taste it, but it's a big stalk of broccoli. And it's embarrassing. You have something stuck in your teeth, but it's broccoli. Taste it, feel it, great. Fourth place on your body were your ears. And the fourth brain food, olive oil. So I want you to imagine you're cleaning your ears with olive oil. What does that feel like? Or maybe you're wearing olive earrings, something to remind you of olive oil. Okay. Number 5 is your throat. And I want you to remember eggs. If your diet allows, again, the choline in eggs, precursor to acetylcholine, which is good for cognitive health. And so imagine a hard-boiled egg stuck in your throat. Instead of an Adam's apple, you have an egg. Or maybe Humpty Dumpty is touching your throat, whatever, right? But your throat. All right, number 6 are your shoulders. And the 6th brain food are green leafy vegetables. So imagine shoulder pads of kale and spinach. You're looking to your left and your right, and you're having shoulder pads, but they're made of this green leafy vegetables, kale and spinach.
Okay.
All right, 7 is your collar, and it was salmon. So your omega-3, your DHA. So I want you to imagine a necklace made out of salmon sushi. Maybe make it a week old. So a week old salmon sushi.
Okay.
All right, so you're never going to forget that. 8 are your fingers. So just wiggle your fingers. And the 8th brain food is turmeric. So imagine that golden powder. You just can't get it off your fingers. It's like in your nail bed and everything. Golden powder. The active ingredient is curcumin, which lowers inflammation, a good brain food. So you can't get the turmeric off your fingers. All right, 9 is your belly. And I want you to imagine the 9th brain food are walnuts. So imagine eating walnuts out of your belly button. That's kind of weird. But honestly, if you're walking outside and somebody was on the bench eating walnuts out of their belly button, would you need to study it for an hour? Would you need to rehearse and repeat it 100 times in your mind? You see it once, and it becomes unforgettable because it's something that's ordinary and you made it extraordinary in your mind. And so imagine you're eating walnuts out of your belly button. Walnuts, number of benefits. They're vitamin E, very neuroprotective. Walnuts kind of look like a brain. Has a little memory trick to remember it. And then finally, the 10th place on your body is your bottom. And let's make the 10th brain food is dark chocolate. And I don't want to know what anybody is picturing right now, but dark chocolate and bottom. All right, now imagine you are at the market, or let's say we call you up and say, "Hey, we're going to be doing this brain healthy dinner tonight," and you, the listener, we call you and say, "Can you stop by the market and get these 10 brain foods?" And you're driving, but so you can't write it down. So you put it really quickly as I said it, because it takes a lot more time to explain it than it does actually to see it, right?
And presumably the more you do it, the quicker you get at this.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so you have the 10 things, you put it on your body, and so now you're at the store, you're walking around the aisles, and I'm talking to the listeners here. Do you remember what's on the top of your head? What brain food? Avocados. And coming out of your nose, use blueberries, those brain berries. And stuck in your teeth is the broccoli. And then you're cleaning your ears with the olive oil. And stuck in your throat is an egg. Good. And you have shoulder pads
kale and
spinach. Good. And you have a necklace that's made of salmon. And that could be sardines. It could be flax, your omega-3s. And then your fingers, you
turmeric.
have golden turmeric, good. And then your belly button, walnuts. And then your bottom, you have the
chocolates.
Yes. And then it's amazing because
I haven't written anything down, right? That is just in real time.
The lesson here is when you understand how your brain works, you could work your brain. When you understand how your memory works, you could work your memory. I could go into the science of it a little bit, but basically we remember things based on place. I mean, think about a hunter-gatherer. We need to memorize formulas and lots of numbers or whatever. We need to memorize where things are. Where's the fertile soil? Where's the enemy tribe? Where's the clean water? Where's the crops? Where's the food? Everything. Or the animal, like whatever you're hunting. And so we learn to store things in locations. So this is piggybacking on how our brain already is organized. And why not put the important information you want to remember in those places? Now, you could use your home. You could imagine you're standing in your doorway of your kitchen and you're just going clockwise. So like number one can be a microwave. Number two is the stovetop. Number three is the refrigerator. Number four is a dishwasher. Number five is the sink. And then you have 5 new places, and you could walk into another room adjacent and then do that again for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
So you can use this principle
to memorize facts, client information, product information, key points to a speech.
Yeah, I was going to bring up the speech actually. I've always given speeches without notes. I've just never liked going on stage with notes. But I gave a talk last week, and again, all I think about is arc and narrative. I think, what is the story? What's the journey? Like, what are the 4 points or the 5? Where are you going to start? Where are you going to end? And how are you going to make that journey? I rely on memory for that. Maybe there's more of these techniques I use without realizing it in terms of how I create that arc in my head. But I imagine a simple way that I could apply that is next time, let's say I'm giving a speech or a talk, and let's say I have 5 key points I want to remember, I could use parts of my body or parts of my house, right? And create a story and a visceral feeling about that and the location, right?
Very, very much so.
Yeah.
I get to train a lot of the top TED speakers and actors, and sometimes they don't have to say things verbatim. They just need to remember their key points.
Yeah.
And because what's the challenge sometimes, and speakers would likely relate to this, if you're in the middle of a speech and somebody asks a question and you go to answer it and you come back and you're like, where was I?
Yeah.
Right. But with this, it allows you to, like, so for example, I talk about like these 10 keys for your brain. You could take those 10 keys, because if you're memorizing, you know your content, that's your expertise. You just need a reminder of what point, right? And so let's say it's a good brain diet. I could go back to that microwave, which is my first place, and put all the good brain foods in that microwave really quickly. And then I go to the stovetop, and the second key to a better brain is killing ants. Automatic negative thoughts. So I imagine roasting ants on that stovetop. The third key for a better brain is exercise. So I go to my refrigerator, I open it up, and I'm doing all the calisthenics, CrossFit inside the refrigerator, right? I go over to the dishwasher, and that's brain nutrients. And I open, and it's like all the supplements are in there. I go to the sink, and that's a positive peer group. And I just imagine all my friends washing their hands in that sink, right? And so that's a way of anchoring the things that you want to remember to the areas you're most familiar with. It could be your home, it could be your car, it could be a past home, it could be the mall, it could be your school, it could be your neighborhood.
And then there's so many techniques in Limitless about this, which we're not covering. And I know after our conversation last time, many people, including really good friends of mine, did some of your online courses and just found them profound in terms of increasing reading speed and memory and those sort of things. So this stuff really, really works. Jim, I really want to be respectful to your time. We've got 2 S's left in Limitless, right? What are the final 2 S's?
Let's go. The last 2 S's of Limitless, as you're managing your day to win the day, the next one is your state management. And I feel like, just like we talked about, there's a to-do list and a to-learn list. And even on priority and the importance management, a not to-do list, because I think part of figuring life out is deleting. Remember I said you stop something or do less of something is having a not to-do list, like not touch your phone the first 30 minutes a day or the last hour of the day, right? Not to-do list. But when it comes to your state, I think it's important to even have a to-feel list. So when I say state, I mean your emotional state, like a snapshot of your mood and your mind. So how do you feel? And so feelings, just like when I said you don't have focus, you do it. You don't have motivation, there's a process for motivating yourself. You don't have creativity, there's a process for being creative. You don't have energy, there's a process for generating energy. You don't have feelings, you do them, right? And there's a process, and every feeling has an action attached to it, because a feeling is a signal. Emotion is the energy of motion to signal some kind of action. If you feel nervous or scared, maybe it's an action that you need to prepare for that talk or that presentation at school or at work, right? So have a to feel list, and like, what are 3 things you want to embody in terms of feel that day? And because here's the thing, all learning is state dependent. And that means that we tend to remember things that make us feel a certain way. Just like when we did the brain foods, which I've challenged people to see if they still remember.
So wherever they are, if it's safe to do so, pause the podcast and see if you can remember them.
Absolutely.
I think that'll be a really useful experiment to run.
And at the end, when you're done, like, post it online, tag both of us on there so we get to see it.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
How many you remember? Absolutely. I'll repost, because you'll tag us so we'll see it. I'll repost a few, and then we'll gift out a few copies of the new Limitless edition.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Just randomly, just as thank you for having me on the show. But the idea here is information by itself is forgettable. Information combined with emotion becomes unforgettable. And just like you tend to remember blueberries come out of your nose because there's, that's kind of ludicrous and a little funny, you're more likely to remember it. So you understand how your memory works, you can work your memory. So state management is, you are a thermostat. You could determine how you feel because you either change the external world or you change the internal world. And I think the quickest way of changing how you feel is, like right now, everybody, sit the way you'd be sitting or stand the way you'd be standing if you're really excited. That was the feeling. You're really excited about listening to the two of us have this conversation. You're very interested and excited. Now, my question for all of you is, why do you even have to move? You should be excited anyway, right? But your physiology is going to affect your psychology, right? And so the idea here is you control how you feel. And if you don't feel something, you're not going to remember it, and all learning is state dependent, but so is life. Life is a set of emotions. You ever have emotions and time stands still? Yeah, exactly. Or a certain set of emotions and it just goes by really, really fast. So those emotional states affect how we perceive time and it receives our environment, our reality. So I would say for state management, remember, you don't have to be at a 10 all the time, but have some mindfulness and say hey, these are 3 states I want to cultivate. Like for learning, for me, I want to cultivate playfulness. I want to cultivate a level of focus. I want to cultivate confidence, which is an emotional state. And then once you do that, you could play a game inside your mind and say, how playful do I feel on a scale of 0 to 10? Or how excited do I feel on a scale of 0 to 10? And you say, okay, 4. Then you play this game in your head and say, well, how do I make it a 5? Or how do I make it a 6? You don't have to jump all the way to 10, right? But okay, well, maybe I'll reward myself with this and I could get 2 more points on that and feel more excited. Or maybe I have to change it in my head. So I turn this into this and then I get some perspective and makes me feel a little bit more excited. Because every level you jump is a huge level in emotion and learning also. So state is manage your state. For yourself and also for other people. And then finally, the last S in limitless, if you want to win the day, you also want to be able to manage your surroundings. So surrounding management, that's your environment. And I feel like our environment, again, our external world is a reflection of our internal world. And so whatever is in your environment, if it's very creative, you're going to be more creative, right? If you put in your environment things that have more joy, things that bring you joy. That's awesome, by the way. The million subscriber plaque. Yeah. That brings me joy knowing that your work gets out to so many people like that.
Thank you.
And so I'm saying is having things in your environment, pictures of loved ones or the things that you're proud of. That's helping manage your surroundings because again, that affects how you feel and if you're making progress, right? Especially clean environment, one that's organized, inspiring for you, and eliminating negative things. So
limitless, wow! So that's a great mnemonic. Learning management, importance management, mind management, implementation management, time management, lens management, energy management, state management, and surrounding management.
Yeah.
I love it. There's something there for all of us. Jim, you've been really generous with your time and how much you share as per usual. I know one of your missions in life is to leave no brain behind.
Yes.
And I know you're planning something special this summer, this big online event.
Yeah.
Can you just tell us a little bit about it?
We've never done anything like this. We invite all your listeners for 3 days virtual event that will upgrade your learning and upgrade your life. And what we're going to do is really show you the key elements to have limitless success. in terms of your mental performance, in terms of the treasures of your life. And we've put together a faculty of amazing experts and individuals that, would charge a fortune to get consulting from, but we're making it completely free.
Because it's an online event.
It's an online event.
Completely free.
It's in the most beautiful studio that we broadcast. You could join us online. There's Zoom cameras. We'll be able to see all of you, thousands of people. And we're bringing in the world's experts on the mind and learning and health. And we're going to share and just pour into you and your family and your team. And so we're very excited. We're excited to have you also as well.
If anyone's interested for this free event, what do they have to do to sign up?
Yeah, very simple. So you could secure your spot online. You just go to jimquick.com/live more.
Okay, so the podcast name, Feel Better, Live More. So live more at the end.
Absolutely. Jim Quick, KWIK.com/live more. And you can secure your spot and share it with your friends. Share that link with your friends, your teammates. It'll be 3 days. If you miss it, you'll miss a lot. So make sure you schedule the time.
And it's going out live?
It's going out live. We'll send the recording out. We'll do a little bit of maybe a 24-hour replay for it also as well. But it's the most highly produced virtual event.
And what are the dates of the event?
Yes, it's August 5th, 6th, and 7th.
Okay, great. So for people around in the summer who want to spend some time learning about their brains and how to upgrade them, they can check this out. Amazing.
Yeah. All the information will be on the website, all the expert speakers, and there's no cost at all. It's just available. So I encourage people to share it. You can post it online, but it's really to be able to, I believe you change your brain, you change your life, you change your brain, you change the entire world.
Jim, that sounds amazing. Totally aligned with your mission of helping more and more people upgrade their brains.
Yeah.
To finish this conversation, you were once a little boy who was told they had a broken brain. And you have managed to change that, whereas now you're a world-renowned brain coach, right? For someone who's listening and feels that they've got a broken brain and feels that they're not living life to their full potential, what are your final words for them?
Yeah. If I could talk to that 9-year-old kid that was struggling with his self-esteem, and then he had a lot of doubt, and he would have all these learning disabilities who just wasn't like the other kids. The two things I would want to install is, number one, you are 100% responsible for your life. Like, what happened, and maybe it's unfortunate, but what are we going to do about it now? But you are 100% responsible. So I would remind all of us that we have a level of agency, that we can't always control what's going on the outside, but you could always control 3 things: your mindset, your motivation, and the methods your actions, right? You could always control your head, your heart, your hands, and have some kind of influence on those things. The second thing I would just remind this person that's struggling is that everything is figure-outable. When you commit to something, everything is figure-outable. And I have that underlying belief, whether it's true or not. I just feel like is it true that that I'll figure it out if I have that belief? No. But if I don't have that belief, I don't think I'm going to randomly just hit that goal or make that happen. What I've discovered over the past 3 decades is that you listening, if you had the tenacity and the interest and desire to listen throughout this episode, I would say you've self-selected, that you probably have forgotten more about personal growth and health and wellness than most of your family and friends will ever learn, and that you're a special individual, and that we're all on this path to reveal and realize our fullest potential. And I would say that it's a real honor for us to be on that path with you. I mentioned this in the previous episode, that I believe there's a version of yourself that's patiently waiting. And the goal is we show up for ourselves every single day until we're introduced. But those little things matter, and you matter. Like, whether you see it or not, your presence in the world makes a difference. And you're enough, not because you bought something or taught something or did something. It's just you're enough because you always were.
Yeah.
And so I would remind you that self-worth and self-esteem, self-confidence, they all start with the word self-love, because you can't get it from somebody else. And no amount of validation or love from somebody external is going to give your soul what it needs from you, right? And so I would just remind those listening that your superpower is your uniqueness, and we could either get bitter or we could get better with the choices that we make every single day. And who's counting on you to be at your best? The person you want to make proud of. I got asked this the other day, who are the two people you want to make proud of? And I was like, I want to, my parents, because of all the sacrifices. And then I was thinking about kids. But really my answer was, I want to make that 9-year-old kid that I was, I want to make him proud. The one that was being bullied, staying up all night, couldn't read, all of that. And then the other person, I was thinking, I want to fast forward to when I'm 90. I want to make that 90-year-old version of myself proud. And so I feel like, if this hits with anybody that's listening, is ultimately, it's an internal game, a lot of life, and I think that the choices that we make a difference. And even the choices we make in kindness, there's this huge ripple effect that could affect the cosmos that we never know, where those little things lead to, especially what's going on inside.
Jim, very inspiring words. Thank you for sharing. Love your work. Love what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming back on the show.
Thank you, everybody.
Really hope you enjoyed that conversation. Do think about one thing that you can take away and apply into your own life. And also have a think about one thing from this conversation that you can teach to somebody else. Remember, when you teach someone, it not only helps them, it also helps you learn and retain the information. Also, don't forget about Jim's free online virtual 3-day event this August that he mentioned towards the end of our conversation. You can see all details at jimquick.com/live more. Now, before you go, just wanted to let you know about Friday 5. It's my free weekly email containing 5 simple ideas to improve your health and happiness. In that email, I share exclusive insights that I do not share anywhere else, including health advice, how to manage your time better, interesting articles or videos that I've been consuming, and quotes that have caused me to stop and reflect. And I have to say, in a world of endless emails, it really is delightful that many of you tell me it is one of the only weekly emails that you actively look forward to receiving. So if that sounds like something you would like to receive each and every Friday, you can sign up for free at drchatterjee.com/Friday5. Now, if you are new to my podcast, you may be interested to know that I have written 5 books that have been bestsellers all over the world, covering all kinds of different topics: happiness, food, stress, sleep, behavior change and movement, weight loss, and so much more. So please do take a moment to check them out. They are all available as paperbacks, ebooks, and as audiobooks, which I am narrating. If you enjoyed today's episode, it is always appreciated if you can take a moment to share the podcast with your friends and family, or leave a review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful week. And always remember, you are the architect of your own health. Making lifestyle changes is always worth it, because when you feel better, you live more.